So today's video is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be actually taking a look in Lightroom at some of my favorite tools that might surprise you. You might not know about them. The tools called Luminosity Masks. Now, as a landscape photographer, when I found out about these, thanks to Thomas Heaton, I use them pretty much in every one of my photos. So we're going to be going through a little bit about that, and maybe a few other tools within Lightroom that you might not be familiar with. Okay, so here's the photo that we're going to be taking a look at. I took this one about last year, I think sometime in September. I took it in a place called Red Leaf Beach, and it was a really nice afternoon. It was quite hazy, as you can tell here. So this is actually how the photo came out after editing. Given I did take it into Photoshop after editing in Lightroom, and I did bring up some of the shadows underneath this bridge with some dodging and burning with a plugin I have, but I'll go through that plugin in another video. So yeah, with the Lightroom Luminosity Masks, I darkened down this very bright hazy sky and brought out some more of that blue in the sky. Now this is actually how I saw the scene on the day. So given there is a lot of editing in this photo, but this is actually how I foresaw the photo when I was taking it. This is how the scene actually looked. I just wanted to bring that to life in editing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Develop tab. I'm going to bring up the graduated filter, which is just this tool here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drag a graduated filter, holding shift to keep the line straight. I'm going to do that. Now, it's come up with this really dark sky because I have a preset for this just so that I can see what I'm doing and where the edge is. I'm going to press O to see the affected area. So you can see that everything in that graduated filter is affected. Even this land over here, the buildings, the sailboats, the city in the background, and I don't want that. I don't want that affected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to here to the range mask and open up the luminosity mask. Tick show luminance mask. So this is just showing what is being affected. Anything that's red is being affected. So you can also press O to activate that. Then you bring the range. So the bottom, the left hand side of the range mask is the shadows, and the right hand side is the highlights. So I'm gonna bring this all the way up to the up to the highlights, and you can see that it's actually taken the the red off this land here and some of the buildings in the background. Now, I'm going to bring it a little bit because you can see it a little bit red over there, over on the buildings. I'm pointing and I just realized you can't see what I'm pointing to. So you can see that it's a bit red over here still, but I think that's pretty good. Now, this is really good because when you're editing, it's better to do local adjustments than global adjustments. Global adjustments is where you affect the entirety of the photo. So that includes, if I use global adjustments, which is just the normal adjusting exposure, contrast, all this stuff, this is all global. Whereas when you use this tool, and this tool, these three tools are local adjustments. So this is a radial filter, brush filter, or brush tool, graduated filter. I tend to use graduated filter quite a bit because I do adjust my sky quite a bit. I'm going to bring down my highlights a bit. And I'm actually going to untick luminance mask because I'm happy with that. So I'm going to untick luminance mask, or show luminance mask. I'm going to bring down my highlights. bring up my contrast a bit and bring down my exposure. So you can see already that just looks 10 times better. It was quite hazy, so I'm going to dehaze that a little bit. Just being careful not to bring out too much of the orange here because it can look somewhat unnatural. Now, I think that that is quite orange, so I'm going to bring down that temperature a bit. And now that sky is looking so much better than it was before. So I'll show you how it was before in a moment. Yeah, so after this fact, I am quite happy with that, but I wasn't, when I was editing this at first, I wasn't entirely happy with it, so I would have taken it into Photoshop, but we're not going to do this video. I think there's a bit too much contrast in that. Now, this is a really rough edit. This isn't actually how I edited it when I first was editing. Now, I'm not really concentrating too much on the edit because obviously I've already got my edit. I'm just doing this to show you the capabilities of the Luminance mask. Now, if I wanted to edit this, just this blue here, it's really good because with the Luminance mask, you don't have to be too careful. But if you're not using a Luminance mask, or which I'm going to use the color mask, I think it's called, or the hue mask. Yeah, so I'm going to now use the color mask. So I'm in the brush tool, and what I'm going to do is I am going to turn down my feather, which makes it so that it's a lot more hard edge. There's not much of a spread around it that's quite soft. So that just means it comes out a lot harder. And bring down my flow as well. I'll bring it up. And I am literally just going to paint over this. I'm going to press O. And not being too careful, like obviously I'm trying my best, but that was really rough, really quick. You can see that a lot of the red is crossed over into that. And I'm going to go to color mask. And I'm going to drop in here. And you can see that has just selected all that color. So I used an eyedropper tool, which is this one. Just ticked it in here. Boom. And now it's selected all the color that is in that part of it and only that part of it. So now, not much of the red is going over the boardwalk, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to put that back there. I'm going to press O so I can see what I'm doing. Now you can see the exposure's stuffed because it's a preset. I'm going to bring down this blue just to bring a bit more vibrance into this blue. And obviously I would bring this tool over every bit of the water so that it didn't look unnatural, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to just bring it over this part of it. And then contrast, add a bit of contrast, maybe a bit of shadows as well. And you can do whatever you like now with this stuff. I'm not going to add texture. Dehaze it a bit. Just really bring out that blue. You can see here there's quite a hard line here because I didn't select this. And that actually might be a different shade of blue. But I can bring out saturation, or I can even make it warmer. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can make it cooler so it gives it a lot more vibrance in the blue. Like I said before, this is a really rough edit, so this isn't actually how I would edit it. Given it's a great tool, and I love it so much. So one last thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to go back into the adjustment brush. You can also do it in the radial filter, I think. Yeah, you can. So I'm going to go into the adjustment brush, and I'm going to press O, and I'm going to paint in this area underneath the boardwalk. It's quite dark, and I want to bring out some more of the shade, bring out more of the detail underneath the boardwalk. That was the problem because the sunlight was coming from this side. It was casting a really deep shadow on this side. So you can see I've got quite a bit of the red outside of the dark shadows, and that's not what I want. So what I'm going to do, come down to the range mask, luminance, I don't really know what depth is, luminance, I'm going to show luminance mask, and now I'm going to bring it down to the shadows. So now I only want to adjust the shadows. So I bring the right side of the luminance mask, which is the highlights, down all the way to the shadows. So now you can see there is a bit of red here, but what you can do if you want to fix that up is you go erase, and then you just erase any of that, and you can adjust the flow so it's not as hard. Now, obviously, in my real edits, I would take my time. I wouldn't be editing with a massive flow rate and a really low feather, because that's just not how you do it. But for the sake of time, I'm just using this so that I can do it really rough and really quick. I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to bring up those shadows, and you can see those shadows so much better already. Now this tool is so powerful, it can be used in so many different ways, and I highly recommend it. It's so important. It's such a great handy tool. I highly recommend it. I just said that, now I've said it twice. Why do I do that all the time? So yeah, you can do anything to any parts of the image. So you can see here, this is the before and after photos. So you can see down here especially, it's really quite dark here. You don't have much of the detail of the coral on the stumps. But on this side, we have quite a bit of detail in the coral on the stumps, underneath the boardwalk, and even some of the water as well, which I think looks really nice. And as well as that, if we go up here to the sky, you can see this side is considerably brighter, and it's too bright. This is, it looks a lot more neutral on this side than it does on this side. This is well overexposed, and, well, I wouldn't say well overexposed, but it is overexposed. And then this one it suits the scene a lot nicer. And then, of course, down here, we've got the bluer water. I think that's too blue, but for the case of time, I'm not gonna, put too much effort into it. Thinking about it, you could brighten up this island over here if you wanted to. You could bring out some more of the orange coming in from the sides here. You could darken if the boardwalks are down here, the poles look a little bit bright. Maybe you could remove some of the glare off that. And it's such a tool that it allows you the freedom of editing without having to be too careful. And I think that's great. It's so nice, because without the luminance tool, you have to be really careful. It still counts to be careful when you're using the luminance or the color tool, but it means that if you go a little bit over the line, you don't have to worry too much about it. So that's going to be the video for this week. Now, I know it's a bit of a different one, and I'm sorry that I wasn't out on location this time round, but I haven't had time to get out, and I did want to get a video out for this week. Now, let me just talk about a little bit about local and global adjustments. Global adjustments, as I said before, affects the entire photo. I do some global adjustments, not too much. My global adjustments normally tend to just consist of a quick exposure fix and maybe a bit of contrast and maybe a bit of curves adjustment. That's really it, unless it's like sharpening and stuff like that. With local adjustments, it's a lot more painting over it. You're editing specific parts of the image. That's a lot more of a healthier edit flow as well, because it's just adjusting the parts that are actually overexposed or the parts that are underexposed, or just the little parts of the image. I highly recommend doing local adjustments. They take a little bit longer, but it just changes the game when it comes to editing, and trust me on that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this different type of video. Let me know if you want to see more of these kinds of Lightroom tutorials. I have a few extra things I can talk about, metadata and stuff like that if you like. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.